Hello and welcome to TVS Correspondent, the show where we take a look at what's happening in the US and around the world. I am Sheera, and with me is our correspondent for the United States of America, who is now in Washington, D.C., Alfian Zaini. Hi, Alfian. It's great to have you on the show. How are you doing?
Hi, Yumi. Fantastic to be seeing you for the first time, especially. Hi.
Oh, okay. Great. Let's get going then. Okay, the United States and China announced a joint agreement last Wednesday to enhance ambition on climate change, saying they would work together to do more to cut emissions this decade, while China committed for the first time to reduce methane, a potent greenhouse gas. Okay, they say that they will develop regulatory frameworks and environmental standards to reduce emissions and announce new national targets within 4 years to be reached by 2035. Okay, they also intend to maximize a clean energy transition and develop carbon capture, utilization, and storage platforms. Now, Alfian, does this pact between these two rivals surprise you?
Yes, in fact, it did. The pact between the world's two biggest polluters came as a surprise to the thousands of attendees gathered in Glasgow for United Nations Climate Summit. China and the United States, rivals that face growing tensions over trade, human rights, and other issues, spoke as allies in the fight to keep global warming to relatively safe levels. China's climate change envoy Xi Jinping said the US and China both see the challenge of climate change as existential and a severe one, and that as two major powers in the world, China and the United States need to take their due responsibility and work together and work with others in the spirit of cooperation to address climate change. John Kerry, the US Special Envoy for Climate, followed the remarks from Mr. Xi with an assessment of his own. He said that the US and China have no shortage of differences, but on climate, cooperation is the only way to get this job done.
I see. Okay, Alfian, have there been any detailed plans laid out in this joint agreement?
Unfortunately, the joint agreement was short on specifics. It did not extract a new timetable from China under which the country would ratchet down emissions, nor did China set a ceiling for how high its carbon dioxide and other greenhouses gases would reach before they started to fall. China agreed to phase down coal, the dirtiest fossil fuel, starting 2026, but did not specify by how much or over what period of time. The announcement from China and the United States came on the same day that the summit organizers issued an initial draft of a new global agreement to fight climate change that called on countries to revisit and strengthen by the end of 2022 plans for cutting greenhouse gas emissions and to accelerate the phasing out of coal and subsidies for fossil fuels. The language on coal and government fossil fuel subsidies would be a first for a UN climate agreement if it stays in the final version. Yet, many countries and environmentalists said that the rest of the document was still too vague on crucial details like what sorts of financial aid richer nations should provide poorer ones struggling with the cost of climate disasters and adaptation. Negotiators from nearly 200 countries are likely to demand significant changes to the draft as the talks enter their last most difficult stretch. By tradition, a new global agreement requires every party to sign on. If any one nation objects, talks can be deadlocked. Yumi.
Yes, indeed. Okay, persuading nations around the world to move in a new direction is a very difficult challenge. So, what did the experts have to say about this joint agreement, Alfian?
Well, several experts said that the joint pact between China and the United States fell short of a 2014 deal between the United States and China to jointly curb emissions, which helped spur the Paris Climate Agreement among nearly 200 nations a year later. Former climate diplomat Tom Woodruff said, while this is not a game changer in the way that the 2014 US China climate deal was, in many ways, it's just as much of a step forward. given the geopolitical state of the relationship. It means that the intense level of US China dialogue on climate can now begin to translate into cooperation. The agreement won praise among leaders and diplomats at the climate summit, who said they hoped it would inject fresh energy into the global negotiations aimed at keeping global temperatures from rising to dangerous levels. With just days remaining from the summit ends, negotiators are working late into the night to try to hammer out a global accord that they hope can satisfy every country, and that's not an easy feat to achieve.
Yes, exactly. Well, solving climate change is indeed a monumental, if almost impossible task. But we can all agree that this pact between two rival world powers is a step in the right direction. We'll see where this goes for now on. And with that, we'll be right back on TVS Correspondent after a short commercial break. Stay tuned. And we're back on TVS Correspondent as the Delta variant became the dominant strain of the coronavirus across the United States. All three COVID 19 vaccines available to Americans lost some of their protective power, with vaccine efficacy among a large group of veterans dropping between 35% and 85%. This is according to a new study published in the journal Science. Now, Alfian, could you care to provide some details on these new findings?
Of course, Yumi. Researchers who scoured the records of nearly 800,000 US veterans found that in early March, just as the Delta variant was gaining a toehold across American communities, the three vaccines were roughly equal in their ability to prevent infections. But over the next 6 months, that had changed dramatically. By the end of September, Moderna's two-dose vaccine, COVID-19 vaccine, measured as 89% effective in March, was only 58% effective. The effectiveness of shots made by Pfizer and BioNTech, which also employed two doses, fell from 87% to 45% in the same period. And most strikingly, the protective power of Johnson & Johnson's single-dose vaccine plunged from 86% to just 13% over those 6 months. The three vaccines held up better in their ability to prevent COVID 19 deaths. But by July, as the Delta variant began to drive a 3 month surge of infections and deaths, the shot's effectiveness on that score also revealed wide gaps. Yumi.
Okay, so would shots help in this regard, Alfian?
With millions of vaccinated Americans pondering whether they need a boost, the new study offers the most comprehensive comparison yet of how the three vaccines have performed across the nation this year. The Centers for Disease Control and Prevention has recommended booster shots for everyone who got the Johnson & Johnson vaccine at least 2 months earlier. Boosters are also recommended 6 months after a second dose of the Moderna or Pfizer vaccines for everyone 65 years and older, those with medical conditions that make them more vulnerable to a serious series case of COVID-19, those who live in nursing homes or other group settings, and those who live or work in high-risk settings, such as hospitals or prisons. In addition, all people with compromised immune systems are advised to get a booster shot if it's been at least 28 days since their vaccine took full effect, Yumi.
I see, I see. So, would I be correct in assuming that the declining efficacy of vaccines would necessitate mass mandates, regular swab testing, and other standard operating procedures to prevent potential outbreaks in the US?
Yes, that's right. The study's lead author, Dr. Barbara Kahn, said that in addition to its comparison of COVID 19 vaccines, the group's analysis provides a lens for making informed decisions around primary vaccination, booster shots, and other multiple layers of protection. That includes mask mandates, coronavirus testing, and other public health measures aimed at countering viral spread. Strong evidence of the vaccine's declining power should prompt even states and locales with highly vaccinated populations to consider retaining mass mandates, Yumi.
I see. Okay, Alfian, what is causing this decline in the efficacy of vaccine? Is it caused by the Delta variant or is it some other combination of factors?
The study concluded that the Delta variant, which drove a wave of infections and death across the country over the spring and summer, was probably the factor that most eroded the protection of vaccines. Other researchers have found similar evidence of declining vaccine effectiveness, but they have suggested that the immune system's defenses against the coronavirus simply fade with time, and that waning vaccine effectiveness would probably have been seen with or without the arrival of a new or more transmissible strain, Yumi.
I see, I see. Alfian, as always, thank you for the insight.
Okay, you're welcome, and I hope to see you again
Most
later
definitely.
soon.
That's all the time we have for this episode. Thank you for watching and join us next week on TVS Correspondent. I am Yumi Shreni with Alfian Zaini. Stay safe and bye bye.
Take care.